In this episode, I'm going to be sharing with you 7 success secrets using your old podcast episodes. Tune in. This is the Podcast in the Rough. Tune in every Friday for new adventurous episodes. All right, welcome back to the Podcast in the Rough. I'm your host, Zebulon Thomas, and this is episode 113. I'm going to share with you 7 strategies I created to help you turn your old podcast episodes into new content. And this is really going to blow the door open for you, depending on how you use it, but it's going to be very helpful, especially if you've been doing podcasts for a long time and you have a big catalog of old episodes. In my case, I've went through different seasons. I've even changed my podcast name over the years. So this is going to be great to resurface these old episodes with some new editing, some new flavor, if you will, rewrap it, and really just put it back out there for either micro content, new content, exclusive content, or rebrand in a new way. So we're going to dive right into these 7 strategies that will turn your old podcast episodes into new content. All right, so before we get started, I do want to just remind you that I have a podcast community mastermind Facebook group that is absolutely free to get in. And if you want to jump inside this group, just head over to thepodcastintherough.com/learn. And I'm deep diving into how to podcast from start to success. So if you want to learn how to launch your podcast successfully, bring new life into your podcast, take your podcast to the next level, whatever that is, we're talking about podcasting inside this group, and it's exciting. And I have a lot of great tools in there that you can utilize right now that is absolutely free. So again, that's thepodcastintherough.com/learn. Also, I want to give you my framework on how I'm setting up my podcast. And it's been growing and changing over the years, but there is a secret formula that I'm using for my framework that I've used to help other people grow their podcast. So definitely check that out. All right, so I'm really excited about this episode because it's going to help you go back and take your old content, your old episodes, and turn that into new content. So I encourage you to take a little bit of time here and put these strategies to work for you. So number 1, find the gold. Go through all your previous podcast episodes and find gold nuggets, things that stand out, that are really good, like really juicy content. And you take that and you cut it down into micro clips to resurface this on your social media platforms. So this could be in the form of YouTube Shorts, Instagram Stories, Instagram posts, Facebook Stories, Facebook posts. I mean, you name it, TikToks, post for your LinkedIn. You're really just taking all this juicy content from the past and you're making little micro clips and you're putting them together and you're using that content. Now, when you post this content in the form of these shorts or these micro clips, you're going to want to also write a good description, write a great post around it, make it even more juicier for the world to digest. Be like, what is this episode? This is great. How did I miss this? And you want to link that episode in the description of wherever you're posting this. Or let them know that this is episode 5 or episode 10, and this was a great clip from that. If you want to listen to the full episode, tune in here. And so this is going to be a great opportunity for you to plug your podcast, to promote this old episode and drive more traffic to that episode, so it brings more life into it. You can also use this content to tell people about maybe you started a new podcast website that you didn't have when you did those old episodes. So now you can go ahead and you can put the URL on there and say, hey, this episode now sits on my new platform, my new website. Or you could also say, hey, you know what? I didn't get to have a lot of traffic because at the beginning I didn't have a big following. So these older episodes didn't get a lot of traction, but now you can bring more life into that and drive more traffic there. So again, you find the gold nuggets in old episodes and then cut them up into micro clips. And these micro clips might be 15, 30, 60 seconds long, but now you're putting them up on your new platform to just breathe life and drive traffic to that in all areas. Number 2, taking your old episodes and turning them into new episodes with the old content. So what does that sound like? So what that's going to sound like is you have, out of all your episodes, you have 10 or 15 incredible episodes talking about branding for your business, or talking about email marketing, or talking about creating a hobby or de-stressing your life, right? You have all these gold nuggets that maybe episode 1 had a really good bunch of tools on it. Maybe episode 10 had some really good deep dives on that. And maybe you had a guest on another episode that went into the same topic, but these episodes weren't geared for that. But you touch base on those same tools across these older episodes. So what you're going to do is go back and find them. So in my case, my older episodes talk a lot about de-stressing and how to live a free life and how to go out there and be happy and get motivated and all types of empowerment, self-development type of tools. So I'll go through and pull each each golden nugget from this. Like we were talking about before, you find the gold. So we're going to go through and find each section, but these sections might be longer. So you just find like, hey, this is 10 minutes where I went on a riff about, how to de-stress, or this is a small 1 to 2 minute clip in here that talks about, the tools I use for deep breathing that really calm me down. Or this is like a 5-minute section that talks about how I get motivated in the mornings, or things that will motivate you to go step forward and go get what you must have in your life. So I take all these pieces, and now, yes, they're going to sound a little different. Maybe your energy was different on each one. So you want to string these together. So what you could do is you could say, hey, these are 10 key strategies, are my best tools or my best tips and tricks for de-stressing your body, or finding motivation in your life, or creating a compelling podcast, or building a career, whatever that is for you. And then you string those together. So you might introduce the episode. You might go on there and go, hey, on this episode, I'm giving you these top 10 tools, tips, or tricks, or whatever that is. And then it goes into it. And you just simply go, number 1, and then you speak whatever number 1's topic would be. And then you cut to that episode. And then you have a quick break. And that break is you coming back going, so what did you think? Or you go right into number 2, and then you introduce that title or whatever this tool is, and you share that piece of content. That way, if the episodes, when you line them up, if they all sound differently, maybe you recorded them in different places, or they have different audio qualities, now it's not going to sound so bad because you're breaking them up. They're prepared for these top tips. So what you've done the research, you've done all the hard work. You tell them, hey, listen, I've pulled all this content from my previous episodes, and I put them together real nice for you for this piece of content. Now, what you could do with that to extend on that is you could also be doing that, combining these and putting them on like a Patreon, or putting them on a Buy Me a Coffee, or any other funding platform that people can contribute to get exclusive content from you. So this could turn into extra content that now you can charge for them to come and subscribe and be a part of this exclusive stuff. So that's good too. I mean, because of course they can go back and listen to these episodes, but a lot of people haven't heard your older episodes, or they have, but they might have missed something. But if you can put it all right there in front of them, this is going to be a very powerful tool for you to leverage more success and more traffic to your podcast, and even turn that into some monetization for yourself. So when you post this new episode with all these gold nuggets talking about the new tools and tips and tricks, make sure in the description you share the links to those episodes in which that content originated from, so they can go back and listen. This will also drive traffic to those older episodes. That's a very good thing to do. So don't miss that step. That's going to be great. Number 3, grab content from your old episodes and turn them into your podcast trailer. Now, if you haven't created a trailer yet for your podcast, this is a great opportunity to do so, because when you do this, you can combine a lot of great key pointers that you talked about, or great moments from your previous episodes, and turn them into a exciting podcast trailer that will just really give the listeners an idea of like what to expect from your podcast. Like, hey, if I tune in and subscribe, this is what I'm going to get. This is like a great mashup of all the excitement that goes on in this podcast, or all the great tools, or all the great interviews. This is good stuff. I want to be a part of that. So you can really grab all that old content and turn it into a podcast trailer. And you might need to add a little at the front of the back or in the middle, and maybe throw some music on that. It'll really make it juicy for your podcast listeners. Number 4, turning your old podcast episodes into a promo commercial. So what you want to do is go back and you want to pull all these different parts of your old episodes, and you want to turn that into a podcast commercial. So the goal of turning your old episodes into a commercial would be, hey, like for my case, I have this podcast community mastermind group and I want to promote it. Well, my older podcast episodes, I didn't have the group formed yet, so I didn't talk about it. So I can go back and grab the best parts of maybe my favorite episodes that I feel it's going to fit right into teaching podcasts or talking about how I do podcasts. And I'm going to grab those key sections and I'm going to make a short 15, 30, or 60-second commercial. And so I'm going to get creative with my copy, and I'm going to write a talking part at the very beginning, and it might introduce you to, have you joined the Podcast Community Mastermind? And then it cuts into micro clips. Inside this group, you're going to get, bam, there's my micro content. Cut back to me talking about how to join. Go to thepodcastingrough.com/learn and get involved and get more tools like this, or hear more exclusive content like this, or talk about podcasting. So a commercial is exactly that. It's like your best highlights. It's something that really pulls them in. They want to see or hear what that is. So you're grabbing, boom, the key features of all these episodes that talk about, in my case, it's podcasting, And it's like, boom, did you know you could do this with your podcast? Oh, on today's episode, we're talking about creating a podcast trailer. It's going to be so great. Maybe it fades out. And then you hear me talking about, did you know that your podcast can generate revenue using this platform? Boom. Then it could cut into like, this is how you make your voice sound incredible using this customized EQ. And then it cuts out again to maybe some music. And it goes, would you like all the tools in one place? Join my podcast community mastermind group on Facebook by heading over to thepodcastintherough.com/learn. And now I have a commercial that advertises my new group using my older episodes. So now I'm utilizing my older episodes and finding the key points that I talked about before in that energy, capturing that moment of those episodes. Because yes, you could go back and listen and be like, all right, I'm going to just re-say that. But the energy might not be there. You want that energy that you created when you did that episode to come through and hit the viewer as they listen to this commercial in different waves, because they're not all going to sound the same. And that's going to be so good. It's going to be like the best scenes. Like when you watch an action movie, like let's say Transformers, and you see like Optimus Prime fighting and it's like a loud noise and there's a bunch of banging going on and they got some music behind it. And then the next one, the camera's zooming in on one of the characters just looking in awe, like what is happening? And then it cuts right back into the action. Like that's what your podcast commercial is going to sound like. It's going to be different ups and downs or different sounds and qualities that is going to mesh this together and make it just a really good piece of content that you can use as a commercial. So this will also drive traffic to your podcast as a whole or to your group. Okay, number 5, take your old episodes and turn them into a podcast book. This right here is gold. This right here, I promise you, if you do this, you're going to be so proud of this when it's done. If you go back and take all your previous episodes and you find the best of the best, you take your transcripts and you simply just start to reword them or reshape them a little bit into the form of a book, it is going to be next level for you. Because think about it. First of all, if you've done your transcripts already, you already have all the content you need. It's right. You just have to go through and maybe trim the fat, or have to go through and just add a little bit to it to spice it up a little bit. Or it might be perfect, right? And then you just weave these episodes together in the form of chapters. Now, if you don't have your podcast transcripts, then all you got to do is go back and take your old episodes and find a program or hire a transcriptionist and have them transcribe all of your old podcast episodes. And find the best of the best, of course. Don't just have it just random. But I mean, your podcast, if you've been doing this over time, it grows. Like my season 1, 2, and 3 now can definitely be a book, because there's a lot of great gold nuggets there, a lot of learning, a lot of growing, evolving, and a lot of like talking about the behind the scenes and things happening in my life that come through into the podcast. You can also write about like each episode and then tell the behind the scenes stories of how that episode came about. Like, in this episode, I talk about Steve Larson, right? But I could also talk about the journey in which I met Steve Larson, like all the different people that I went through my life in order to connect me to Steve Larson. And then an amazing aha moment that I was like, oh, this dude's cool. Like I remember watching, or anybody, like how I met Arnold Schwarzenegger and got to work with him, or how I got to meet all these other exciting entrepreneurs. It's like my life has opened up because I'm chasing all this opportunity and success and the things that I must have in my life. I've created this amazing story if you look at the whole scope of my podcast. So if you look at the whole scope of your podcast, I guarantee you have a really good story here, and that can be turned into a nice book. You might just have to add some really good fluff around it and tell the story. But if you convert your podcast episodes into a book, or maybe you're just starting out and you don't have this. Well, now you can start thinking about dropping podcast episodes that will eventually turn into a book. So it's like now you're thinking about these as chapters, but they're coming out as episodes, right? Because if you do this, now you could go over to Amazon or go over to a publisher and you can get this book published. Now listen, I've published books before. It is not that hard. You just got to put in the upfront work. It doesn't even have to cost you a lot of money. I published my first sci-fi novel in 30 days, and it didn't cost me a lot of money. All I spent on this was ordering copies of my own book. I didn't have to pay to actually get it published. It was amazing. So there's opportunities out there. I'm not going to go into detail about that. That's on other episodes, and maybe I'll resurface those for you. But you can get all your episode transcripts or transcribe your episodes and turn these into a great book. And then think about that. If you do this, now you're a published author on Amazon or wherever you're at, and people can get your book. And I mean, imagine what that cover looks like. Imagine what that title looks like. Imagine what that success feels like. To say, hey, you know what? Not only am I a podcast host or I'm growing this business, but I also have a book I publish. What's exciting about that is you're not a writer. Like maybe you're not a writer. You never thought, how can I write a book? Well, this gives you the opportunity to write a book. It's not part of your business. It's not part of your blueprint. It's not part of your business model. It's not part of you. But you were able to still write a book. That's incredible. And that's just from you doing the things that you do. So number 5 is gold right there, turning your podcast episodes into a podcast book. Okay, number 6, bring life back into your old episodes. Drive more traffic to them. And this is how you do that. And this is going to promote your podcast, even your groups, anything you're trying to push, your new social media platforms, everything that's new that wasn't there before. You're going to really use these old episodes to leverage that to drive more traffic. And so how you do that, you go back, you grab an old episode and you're going to re-edit it. So in my case, like season 1, my podcast right here was called the Zebulon Thomas Podcast. I would take all my previous episodes that start with a different intro. It's like, this is the Zebulon Thomas Podcast. And I'm going to chop that off. And I'm going to chop out anything that says the Zebulon Thomas Podcast. And I'm going to trim the fat. And I'm going to cut out all the unnecessary content that I feel like it wasn't useful. It just didn't hit well. And I'm going to trim the ending off too. And then I'm going to rewrap these old episodes with the new branding. It's going to be, this is the podcast in rough. And this is episode blah, blah, blah. Or this is a recap of episode, bam. And it's a micro edit. Or it's an extended edit where you're adding to the content a little bit. You're speaking and weaving all these older episodes to blend better. Plus, this gives you opportunity to go back and maybe your editing skills have improved. So now you can do a better job at editing that podcast. Or maybe you have a better EQ or a better editing software. So now we can enhance the audio quality of that older episode and enhance it and remaster it. So it could be like, hey, this is blah, blah, blah old episode and it's been remastered. And I've added some extra content to it, right? And you can then resurface this on your LinkedIn, your YouTube, and put it back up. And then what I would do is I would go ahead and I would include the link to that episode in the description. So they can go back and listen to the original or a link back to your podcast or your new website or whatever you're promoting. You can also now plug in those commercials, those promo ads, talk about the new group maybe you started, maybe the new book that you just wrote because you just made a podcast book, like I said before, and you string this all together, and now you've resurfaced this old episode with a remastered with some new wrap on it, if you will, just polished it up. And this is a great way to do that because especially if you're struggling with creating content and maybe you're doing an episode every week, or twice a week, well, maybe you're going to have to juggle that back and forth. We have a new episode every week, but then you also have a remastered episode. And it kind of goes back and forth. That's if you have a big catalog. So it's a good thing to do. But also think about this if you don't have this catalog, as you move forward, if you ever get stuck, don't be afraid to go back and remaster something. I mean, even if it was last week, maybe you did upgrade all your equipment. You got some new stuff, or you're learning a new skill. You're like, I'm just going to re-edit last week's and just remaster it. I mean, you could do that. Just add some more to it. Make sure you're always adding value, and it's going to be okay. As long as you add some value to it, you explain to them and be transparent to your viewers, your listeners, that, hey, this is remastered. It's the same episode, just sounds better. What do you think? Or you know what? We added some new stuff to this, right? Be transparent. They will love that. They will eat that up. Where this is also highly effective is taking these old remastered podcasts that you've edited and cleaned up and made them sound even better. Well, let's just say you never had a LinkedIn account. Well, this is great for you to jump on the LinkedIn and start sharing these older episodes and just say, hey, check out all new episodes. And you link that in the description or in the creative post that you write around this. Or say you're just starting a new YouTube channel, it's a new one, a second one. Now you can just put those episodes up on there. So it's a great way for you to break into also new platforms that you've not been on yet. And especially if they have the opportunity to post long form content, then you could do that as well. And if they don't have long form content, then you just go back to these other previous steps that we talked about and you surface them into micro content, which is going to be also beneficial. Number 7 is one of my favorites because this helps you dive into written content, and blogs are big. So turn your old podcast episodes into blog posts. This is incredible. This is gold. And if you haven't started a blog yet, I've had several blogs in the past, but I don't have a new one. And so I'm going to apply this right away to a blog that I have that I've been wanting to create because I have the option to do so on my new thepodcastontherough.com website. I have a blog section that I haven't been doing anything with. So this is going to be great for that. So you go back, and if you've been transcribing all your episodes, it's easy. Just pull that and maybe trim the fat again and fluff it up and make a blog post out of it. But make sure you include a link to the actual episode that originated from because it'll drive traffic to it. And it's really great. Or you can reference in there using older content, older episodes. You can reference the newest episode that came out or an episode that was newer that expanded on something that you talked about in this episode. So this is a really good strategy for driving traffic to your website or your blog. If you've got a blog, or if you don't have one, you can start one now. If you don't have those transcripts, then just go back through and pull key pointers from each episode if you don't want to write it out. You can go back to an older episode and go, wow, there's a lot of great tools and tips here, but they weren't formatted in the way of like, hey, tip 1, tip 2, tip 3. And you can actually now make a blog post like that and go, hey, these are like 5 tips, or 5 success secrets that are going to be good for you, or 5 nutritional facts for the food you can eat to lose weight, whatever it is. And you now turn that episode into these 5, and then you fluff it up by talking about it and then add the link. So grab your old podcast episodes and turn them into blog posts. That is a really good tool and strategy for you that you can do right now, especially if you're having trouble finding content to put out there. And you're like, well, how do I just have this podcast just stuck on a platform? Well, no, you can. The whole purpose of this episode today is to show you that you can use your podcast and leverage that content in multiple areas and different platforms and social media outlets and post. And now you can do a blog or a book. You can make mini YouTube trailers, right? Like all these different things that feed your podcast traffic. And the goal of all this, if you apply all these strategies, all these tips, these secrets, these creative ideas by grabbing your old podcast episodes and using them as leverage and driving traffic to them in this manner, this just gives you other creative ways to expand on your podcast, to expand on your outlet, your social media outlets. Because at the end of the day, I want you to think about this. You're not just posting and in the rat race. What you're doing is you're building a community on social media. You're driving traffic to a key source. Like, yes, maybe you have followers on Instagram and YouTube and Facebook, but you want them to go somewhere where we're all together in a hub. Or maybe you leave them on those platforms. So your goal is just to entertain them and give them some great content that they can digest and give them a reason to follow you and go on this journey with you. It's not always about taking them off of YouTube and putting them into a Facebook group. I actually don't recommend that. If you have a great YouTube community, keep them on YouTube. Make the move and build the community in the comments under each videos or in your channel discussion, or if it's on Facebook, do it inside the group, or if it's on Instagram or wherever it is, if it's on LinkedIn, you have this following. And if they want to go deeper, then they can deep dive into these external outlets. But you're using all this content to entertain them, give them great tools and strategies, move them along, bring people together, provide them opportunities to contribute, to get involved in your projects, or support you in some way. And that's the goal. So I hope you apply these 7 strategies, or at least take some of them and start to put them to work, because I guarantee you out of these 7 strategies, you have at least 1 or 2 ready to go right now that you can start working on. And it gives you something to do and it helps you move forward. It's all about the learning process and the journey. You're going to succeed if you continuously allow yourself to grow and you get excited about what you're doing. Like I did an episode last night and it was so exciting. I love it. It's about motivating. And then I was like, today I got up and I said, my energy was a little different. I said, you know what? That was so awesome, over the top motivation I did for my podcast. But now I really I felt like I want to give you some serious value, some tools. And that's when I was like, boom, I'm sitting in my sauna, I'm doing my daily rituals, routines. And I said, bam, I'm going to give them 7 strategies. And I started writing these things out. I'm like, this was just my creative mind going, this could really help people. And at the end of the day, out of this, the last strategy, number 7, is going to help me big time. I'm going to launch my blog now. I'm going to do that. I'm going to take some time and I'm going to have fun with it. And I'm going to take my old podcast episodes and I'm going to create some micro blogs. It's going to be great. And who knows, maybe my blog grows and it has new opportunity to market all my different outlets, or new products or services, whatever it is. You just want to create opportunity for yourself. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much. And I didn't cut to any commercials in this episode. I didn't want to break that up because I didn't want you to get off course and lose focus on what we were talking about. So I do want to cut to a commercial to give you an opportunity to access exclusive content, get involved, or just simply support this podcast in some way. So we'll be right back. If you'd like to support this podcast, buy me a coffee by heading over to buymeacoffee.com/intherough and become part of the adventure by showing your support and taking advantage of any one of our exciting membership tiers.
The Podcast in the Rough.
All right, welcome back. Listen, I'm excited about these new podcast ads that I've been doing. I love creating podcast ads for myself and other people, or even just any type of voiceover work. It's just exciting. I encourage you to create your own commercials. So even though I'm promoting my Buy Me a Coffee and giving you the opportunity to contribute to this podcast and support this podcast, I also am doing this in a way to show you that these are other outlets that you can apply to your podcast as well if you created one, or maybe you have a business or something else. Buy Me a Coffee is a great outlet, or a Patreon, right? And create commercials around that to get people to go there. Don't just post it up, hey, here's my Patreon, here's my Buy Me a Coffee. Give them something, like create something exciting about it. You're doing a commercial for this. So this is fun. And I had a lot of fun creating that commercial. And it just is a really great way for you to contribute to this podcast and show your support. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Today is Fun Friday for me. I hope it's Fun Friday for you. I hope you're going into the weekend strong. You're finishing off the week strong, and you're going to get motivated to do new things. And you're always open to opportunities and new ideas. And that's going to really just launch you in the direction you want to go. So thank you so much. Tune in next week for another episode of the Podcast in the Rough. Take care. This is the Podcast in the Rough.